Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are, get the sign here, the FAIRtax Guys. There we go. Dedicated to the proposition that the IRS is a criminal enterprise that needs to be tossed on the scrap heap of history and replaced with the fair tax. And we will not rest until that happens.
Yep, and that is our purpose, that is our mission here at FAIRtax Power Radio, to educate more people about the fair tax. So they, for one thing, they can't fall prey to demagoguery when a candidate tries to demagogue the fair tax.
Oh, yes.
And also so you can be knowledgeable, so you can contact your congressman or congresswoman and make sure that they are co-sponsors of the fair tax. That's what we need.
Now, just in case you're not sure what we're dealing with, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the income tax. 70-some thousand plus pages of tax code, regulations, court cases defining what the tax code is supposed to do. And when the Congress critters say, we're going to give you this great tax reform, this is what they do.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's about it. Yep.
This is the flat tax. It is still a tax on income. You still have the IRS. You still have to file a tax return. And it can get more complicated as they mess with it over time until it ends up looking like this one. Whoops, I knocked that off. Now, this is the fair tax. Small, simple, even Ron can work this one, so that is not a problem. We'll have to check that out. So again, we appreciate your viewing here on FAIRtax Power Radio. Invite you to tune in. If you do not already have a subscription to Excluded.tv, the app on your smartphone or your tablet, or you can get that for your computer as well. You can check that out, see a lot of the content that the major social media outlets do not want you to see. You can see Ward Scott from 9 to 10, or check that 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. John Martin's on from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday here on Excluded TV. Of course, the FAIRtax guys are on with the FAIRtax Power Radio as well. Well worth the $30 a year subscription fee to Excluded.tv. Check that out.
Yeah, it's good digital TV. And as time goes on, they're going to have more shows on there, too. I mean, this is all brand new within the last couple of months. And it's a new experience for Bob and I.
Now, speaking of checking things out, we have now gone to Congress.gov, as we have been doing here on FAIRtax Power Radio, keeping track of how many changes to the tax code your Congress critters that you keep electing, because there aren't any term limits. We'll have to fix that. But the way they keep messing with the tax code, since this Congress started a year ago, January, in a year and a half, 1,515 is the number of hits you get now on Congress.gov if you go into their search function and type in quotes, Internal Revenue Code. Now, we got some real goodies here that have just been introduced in the past couple of days into Congress, including H.R. 6671 that was introduced yesterday, August 14th. Of course, they'll hear this a bit later. We're recording this on the 15th. But H.R. 6671 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow for a credit against tax for rent paid on the personal residence of the taxpayer. So if you're renting and I'm buying, you get a tax break that I don't. That's no fair.
And not just a tax deduction, a tax credit.
Yeah, credit.
Which has the effect of knocking off,
we'll probably have to read the whole bill to find out exactly how much it is, and then it's probably buried. It'd be a hard time figuring that out. But there is a tax reform proposed to do that. How about you give that renter zero income tax at all?
There you go. Or you could think of it as 100% tax credit. But yeah, and the thing is here, all these 1,500 proposals for this break or that break from the income tax code, and if that's passed, now these 1,500 proposals will not all become law, but a few of them will. All right, and every time, like if they happen to pass that one, and renters will get a tax credit for the cost of their rent, all right, somebody else has to make up that. All right, that reduces their tax burden. Nice for them, not nice for everybody else. Okay, every time somebody gets a tax credit or they legally reduce their income tax, the rest of us has to make up for it.
If you get to credit for your golf balls and I don't get one for my bowling balls, that is not fair, and I'm going to come hunting your head.
That's true. That's true. I mean,
actually, I should be hunting the Congress critter's head that put that in there.
Where does it end?
Another one, H.R. 6661, introduced on August 10th, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for the deductibility of charitable contributions to certain organizations for members of the armed forces. Again, a nice idea, but you don't need to be messing with a tax code to make that happen.
Yeah.
Now this is my favorite one of all the ones that have just been introduced recently. This was introduced by Representative Engel of New York on August the 7th. It's H.R. 6658. And it says to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to deny certain tax benefits to persons responsible for the discharge of oil or other hazardous substances into navigable waters of the United States. Now, no thinking person would like to see oil in the waterway, okay? No. I mean, we're not advocating that folks that do that should get away scot-free, but you don't need to be dinging them on their taxes for doing that. That is another example of using the tax code, to try to encourage behavior you like and discourage behavior you don't like. That is not the purpose of the tax code. The tax code is to collect money for the government.
Yeah, and not to use it as a club to beat somebody over the head.
If you want to bust somebody for discharging oil into the waterways, there are other ways to do that without using the tax code.
I think those people, if they get caught doing that, there are some state and local laws that are pretty severe about that. So why get the tax code involved?
Very simple. Just make them go swimming in it.
There you go.
That will fix the problem. Again, we'd like to remind you our email address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Drop us a line if you would, or drop us a note on our Facebook page. We broadcast live on the FairTax official page, but we, the FairTax Guys, have our own Facebook page. You can leave us comments there. And again, we'd like you to help contribute to the FairTax Guys Rogues Gallery of Dishonest Political Advertising. Yeah. We've been going over this dishonest ad in Florida for the past couple episodes. We've pretty well covered that pretty well. But if there are other dishonest ads running against fair tax supporters in your area of the country, we want to know about it. Send us a link to our fairtaxguys@gmail.com email address, or put it on our Facebook page. And somebody else on our Facebook page had a really good idea to that. We need to get into that. Larry Bell, I think's his name.
Yeah. He put a note on there. I love the fair tax, but sometimes it's explained. The way it's explained is hard for people to understand. He said, and I'm going to shorten it up here. Look at the pay stubs. He said, show some pay stubs. Show some pay stubs under the current system and under the fair tax. And I thought, this is a really good idea. So I actually created a spreadsheet. I got a template for something else, reworked it so it looks like a pay stub. Okay, and so. Gabe, if you could put up the pay stub for the single person, this is the best information I have right now under the current tax code.
Yeah, if you're a single person making $20 an hour, working a 40-hour week, $800 gross pay, the federal government will ding you $11.60 for Medicare. It will ding you an additional $49.60 for Social Security, and it will ding you $176 for federal tax withholding. So of the $800 you earn, you get to bring home $562.
That's for a single person. They really hammer a single person.
They really do. I kind of like the meme we see the other day. Parents, teach your children about taxes. Eat 30% of their ice cream.
Yeah.
That's what the IRS is doing to you. But that's what your pay stub, if you're a single person, would look like. If you earn a gross of $800 a week, you'll bring home $560. It gets a little bit better if you're a head of household. Pop that one up.
Put the head of household up there? Okay. It's a little bit better. All right. You still got to pay. But Medicare and Social Security are the same.
That is the same, because that is the same amount, and that is the most regressive tax on the. If you were making half of that, if you're working 40 hours a week for $10 an hour, you would still get, the percentage would go down, the actual number would go down, but you'd still be dinged the same percentage of your income for Medicare and Social Security.
Now, you'll notice here I screwed up where it says federal tax. I wanted to change that single to a head of household, and I forgot to do it. All right.
That's a $50 fine and a 15-yard penalty. But that's what that looks like. Pop that back up again. How much was the net pay on that one? $642 of your $800. And you ask that person, how much money do you make? If they don't tell you none of your business, say, I bring home $642.
Yeah.
They don't even realize that they earn the $800, and that $800 is their money that the federal government is getting their little paws into before you even get it. You have to feed the government before you feed the family with the income tax. That is wrong. With the fair tax, that fixes that. So if you would like to see what your pay stub would look like under the fair tax, here it comes. Wait for it. No deductions. You bring home your full $800. Now, which of those 3 pay stubs would you rather have?
So we want to thank Larry Bell for that suggestion. Very good suggestion. I'll straighten out the single head of household and so forth. On our next go around, we might use those a few months from now. Never know, but that was a good suggestion. It really hammers home the difference. Yeah, because as I've said before, you get rid of the payroll tax, and the income tax. What is your paycheck going to look like? Well, there we have it. We know what it's going to look like.
Now, if you still have some voluntary deductions, like for family insurance, or if you have something set aside to the credit union, those deductions will still take place under the fair tax. But the federal deductions for Medicare, the federal deduction for Social Security, and the big one, the federal deduction for your income tax withholding, all goes away with the fair tax, because the fair tax does not tax income. It taxes spending. You pay the fair tax at the cash register when you buy things. And again, that is only the retail purchase of new goods and services.
Yeah.
Used goods are not taxed under the fair tax. So if you buy a used car, you can successfully not pay the fair tax, and that's not evasion. They won't bust you for it.
That's right. That's 100% legal.
So there are lots of reasons that everybody should love the fair tax. But this is just the political reality of the way things go today. It is considered, most of the support for the fair tax is coming from the Republican side of the aisle. But we would like to touch here on Fair Tax Power Radio this episode of why the Democrats should love it as well, because it meets a lot, in fact, it meets all of their tax agenda, starting with progressivity. They love progress. Actually, everybody should love progressivity. A regressive tax is not a good idea for anybody.
Well, the problem with the current tax, one of the many problems, is, they say it's a progressive income tax. But how do they make it progressive? Well, they change the tax rates. All right, for this group, it's this percentage, and for this income division, it's this percentage, and so forth, and for this one. And they have, I believe, 7 different layers, and your tax rate, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on. All right. So Congress does it artificially. But then on top of that, they have, we already talked about the proposals to change the tax code. There are a lot of loopholes, legal loopholes, that very wealthy people can take advantage of. So even though they might be in the 35 or 39% or whatever it is now, there's other factors in there that they can legally reduce their tax burden and end up paying a much lower rate.
Yep.
While the people at the bottom, they don't have that advantage.
Well, the income tax as it is, it's fairly progressive. If you look at the figures as to how much percentage of the total tax bill the top 1%, the top 10% pay. I mean, really, the bottom 50% of the income earners under the income tax foot about 1% of the total bill. So there is certain progressivity. We don't want to be dishonest here. The progressive income tax does happen, but I've noticed that somebody thinks the progressive income tax is a wonderful idea. His name is Karl Marx. He wrote that in the Communist Manifesto. So what else, of his ideas need to be codified in federal law? I don't think so. But the fair tax is incredibly progressive. You tell people that it's a consumption tax, you pay to the cash register, and the first reaction you get from a lot of people, oh, that's regressive, it hurts the poor.
Yeah.
Not so. Again, the fair tax has basically a standard deduction. It's called the family consumption allowance. That's how much spending you are allowed to do without having to pay any tax. It will be collected from you at the cash register. It will be reimbursed to you in the prebate, which you'll get once a month. So your out-of-pocket tax rate under the fair tax is L0 until your spending rises above the poverty level, and that includes your federal payroll taxes go away.
They're gone.
Now, those are taxes that the working poor will pay. You don't get that back. Those two are the most regressive taxes there are, and the fair tax gets rid of those things. So people who are concerned about progressivity, people on the Democrat side of the aisle, should love the fair tax because it is so progressive. It's mathematically impossible for someone like Warren Buffett, who spends more money than his secretary, to pay a lower tax rate than the secretary does. It is impossible to spend more and pay less under the fair tax. It is almost impossible to evade, too, because it's included in the price of the things you buy. So the more you spend, the more you take out of your own pocket. Progressivity defined. Folks that are concerned about that should love the fair tax.
And it's simply progressive. And by that, I mean, Congress doesn't have to muck around with it. You're not going to have 1,500 proposals to change it. The fair tax is simple. When it's passed, it's carved in stone. It's a 23% sales tax paid at the cash register on new products and services, okay? However, prices will not go up 23%. We've talked about that before. I'm not going to belabor that point right now. But it is
maybe
very
5 or 10%.
easily progressive. I mean, without doing a lot of messing around by Congress. Maybe I should use the term naturally. It is naturally progressive.
Yeah. If you spend less than the poverty level, you get more back in prebate than you pay. Your tax rate is negative. The government pays you. Yeah. That is as progressive as it gets. And again, people who are on the Democrat side of the aisle everybody should love that. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, doesn't matter what your political affiliation. I don't know anybody who doesn't like more money in their paycheck.
Yeah.
And that's what you get with a fair tax.
And talking about a regressive tax, what's the most regressive tax we have right now?
I've done told you once, the payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare, both of whom are going broke. So if we need to put those programs on a firmer financial footing, the fair tax does that by specifically allocating a particular percentage of fair tax revenue is earmarked for those programs. And with the fair tax, Social Security and Medicare will be supported by everybody who buys things whose spending exceeds their poverty level, and not just the people who are working for a paycheck and getting those payroll taxes deducted.
Yeah, everybody. And by the way, if you're wondering about what worksheet we're working off of, you go to FAIRtax.org, click Resources on the top menu bar, and go down to Demographics, and one of the papers there is 10 reasons why Democrats should strongly support the fair tax. You can get it yourself, print it out, you can look at it. This is exactly what we're working off. And you'll notice that every item here is backed up by research.
Now, there are some rank and file Democrats who love the fair tax. It's the leadership that just doesn't want to give the other side a victory on anything. And the fair tax, though it is perceived as a Republican idea, some people even think it's a Tea Party idea. The fair tax predates the Tea Party by about a decade.
Yeah.
Tea Party came out in the early 2000s. The fair tax was hatched in the mid-90s.
The Americans for Fair Taxation was formed in '95, and the first legislation was launched in '99. So,
And
exactly.
we will be talking to Steve Hayes, the president of Americans for Fair Taxation, next week here on our Fair Tax Power Radio. He is a historian extraordinaire. He can tell us exactly, probably to the millisecond, when all this stuff happened. But back to it.
Very knowledgeable. Yep. So the second one, the number two there was it gets rid of the highly regressive payroll tax. That is the tax that is the same rate no matter what you earn, all right? Oh, no, wait a minute. If you get above something like $120,000, then they don't tax it anymore.
That's capped at a certain once you pay so much, you don't pay anymore.
If you're a family of four and you're just getting by, you're earning like $30,000 a year, you pay the payroll tax. If you're earning $50,000 a year, you pay the payroll tax at the same rate. If you're earning $75,000 a year, you pay the payroll tax at the same rate. So talk about a regressive tax. It really does hurt the people that most need help and should be least damaged by the income tax. And it's not.
That leads up into point 3, that the fair tax is the only tax reform plan that completely untaxes the poor, those at the lower end of the economic ladder, by getting rid of those regressive payroll taxes. The working poor will pay none of that.
That's right.
It completely untaxes them. You get back 100% of what's collected from you. If your spending is at the poverty level, your out-of-pocket tax rate is 0. You get back in your prebate what was taken from you at the cash register. You don't take a dime out of your pocket. You feed your family before you feed the government.
Yep. Now, when you go to the store, under the fair tax, everybody will pay the fair tax on groceries. You buy some furniture for your house, whatever, clothes. yeah, you'll pay the fair tax, but the prebate is going to reimburse you for the fair tax you'll pay on those basic necessities. So it's a wash. Yes, you will pay it at the store, but you're going to get it back in the beginning of the month, hence the name prebate. All right, so it's really going to help those people that are just getting by, that are existing right at the poverty level. And if that family does better, if they get a raise in pay, you know, mom or dad or whoever is working, or both of them get a raise in pay, and they start earning more money, same prebate, because the prebate is only determined by the number of people in the household. That's it.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left to go through a bunch of these. I'm not sure we're going to get to them all. Your time is flying when we're having fun.
Yeah.
The fair tax stops the export of jobs. You know, one of the biggest reasons that people are in poverty is because they got laid off and they don't have any work.
Yeah.
And if the fair tax is a law of the land, this has been proven many times over. The CEOs of international corporations have been asked what would happen if the corporate tax rate in the United States was zero. About 40% of them said they would build their next plant here. The rest of them said they would move the whole company here. The fair tax is the greatest jobs bill that could possibly be imagined because, again, it turns the United States into the most business-friendly place on the planet, and jobs are going to be flowing. You have to be hiding under a rock and not want a job to be not working under the fair tax.
Even though our corporate tax rate was lowered by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of last December, Ireland still has a lower corporate tax rate, and there are like 700 companies that have gone from the United States to Ireland because of the tax rate, and my son works for one of them.
Well, tell him you'll pass the fair tax. You can get him to move back home. Okay, fair tax untaxes education. This is something that's not brought up a whole heck of a lot. Education is not considered spending as an expense like new goods and services. That's what's taxed at the retail level under the fair tax. Education is an investment in yourself. An investment, saving an investment, is not taxed under the fair tax. So if your tuition at the University of Florida or the University of wherever you might be close to, Alabama, Roll Tide, I have to get that in so my brother will not disown me. But your tuition is not taxable under the fair tax. That is not considered spending subject to the fair tax. You can go to school totally tax-free.
Yep. Let's move on to the next one, all right? The fair tax is the only plan that targets and taxes existing wealth, not the fruits of labor. This is very important, okay? It doesn't tax your hard work. But if you have wealthy people, very wealthy people who live on their dividends, all right, and they take those dividends or whatever and they spend, and they get, you know, they have a lavish lifestyle, and they have nice homes and boats and cars and fancy cars and airplanes and so forth. Yeah, all right. When they buy something, they will be subject to the fair tax, and they will contribute. Right now, they're not. If they're living on their dividends, they're paying a little bit of interest on their dividends. That's it. They're not. If they don't have income, they're not paying income tax. So under the fair tax, everybody pays their fair share. Everybody, no matter what.
All right. Boost the real growth and prosperity in the United States. That is the a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. But the fair tax is going to lift more people out of poverty than any government welfare plan that you could possibly imagine.
Yep.
That's your cue. Go.
Okay. The next one, the fair tax is revenue neutral. We haven't mentioned this one in a while. That means that it is designed to create the same amount of income to the resources to the federal government as the current system. All right. And they've done a lot of research on this. A part of the $22 million is what the level has to be. So, yeah, it is revenue neutral. It will not starve the federal government. It will not give them more than they need. It'll provide about the same amount of income that they're doing now. In fact, it's probably going to be a little better because of the evasion issue.
Oh, yeah, the evasion. We've hit on that a lot. How do you evade a tax that's included in the price of the things you buy? You just don't.
Yeah.
And there's billions, that's with a B, billions of dollars worth of evasion under the income tax. So if you want to talk about being fair to everybody, everybody has skin in the game, get a tax that everybody has to pay.
Yeah.
that you don't have to pay it if you're poor. You don't have to pay much out of your pocket to do that. And again, revenue neutral. This is something else people talk about. The fair tax is absolutely not a spending bill. It has absolutely nothing to do with either side's spending priorities. It doesn't help one side and hinder the other. It just simply raises the same amount of money. The debate on how to spend it, that is a debate outside the scope of the fair tax, but it will raise the same amount of money. Now, of course, we're still horribly in debt. We do need to either raise more or spend less. And of course, everybody's touting this 4.1% growth thing that we had in the last quarter. And what a wonderful thing that is. The projections I have read said the fair tax would make your economic growth rate more than double that, around 10%. 10 to 13% in the first couple of years after the fair tax is implemented. So you want to talk about a booming economy where everybody has a job, everybody makes a good wage. The fair tax is it. And if you are on the left side of the aisle and you support that, you don't know it yet, but you support the fair tax.
That's right. You might be a fair tax fan.
You are a fair tax fan.
Reason number 9, the fair tax promotes the American dream. I can talk about the American dream. My parents and grandparents came here almost 100 years ago, okay? They came here, they were not wealthy people, but they managed, and they came here legally, they did their paperwork in the old country, came here, and they made a life for themselves. My parents ran a dry cleaning and laundry store. They started from scratch, and they did live the American dream, all right? They raised a family of 5 children. And we went on vacations and stuff like that. That was not what it was like in 1920 and 1921 when their families came here. They were very poor, but they worked hard and they built a business for themselves. That's the American dream. That's what everybody should have an opportunity to do. And the fair tax does that because it gets the federal government and the income tax off your back, okay? And you can live the American dream. You can earn as much as you want. You can work as hard as you want and not be penalized. That's what the fair tax does for you.
Indeed. And finally, the fair tax is not a political slogan. So if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter. It is not a political slogan. It is a single issue. Let's get the IRS on the scrap heap of history. Let's have a fair, transparent, progressive tax system that funds the government at the same rate that it does now. And the only way that's going to happen is to pass the fair tax.
Yeah, there's so many things that the fair tax will help us fix in this country, all right? And the relationship, we talked about this in last week's episode, the relationship between Congress and the lobbyists. This is not good, folks. We need to stop this nonsense and put the people first.
Okay, right. We've got just a couple minutes left in this episode. Let's make sure to remind everyone, again, of our email address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Like us on our Facebook page, but please be sure to be with us here on FairTax Power Radio. Next week at this time, we will have Steve Hayes, the president of Americans for Fair Taxation, on live with us. You can call in and ask him questions. We'll hang him around for the second recorded show as well. So we're going to talk to Steve Hayes on the next couple of episodes here of Fairtax Power Radio. But next week especially, on the live edition on August the 29th, please be here. Call him up, ask him a question. I tell you, he knows more about the fair tax than anybody on the planet, I do believe. And you talk about a historical perspective on how this all comes about. Some of the people he's talked to, some of the people he's met, you will want to talk to Steve Hayes. So be with us next week at this time on FairTax Power Radio and talk to Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation.
Yeah, that's going to be good. I'm looking forward to that.
Don't miss it. $50 fine.
We're going to have to make room for him here.
Yeah, that's another $50 fine and 15-yard penalty if you don't do that. So. That'll do it.
There you go.
So that's just about going to wrap up this edition of FairTax Power Radio. Again, we do remind you to go to PopVox, P-O-P-V-O-X.
We got some time here.
We got a little bit of time because we got to play your wife's little ad there at the end.
Yeah, that's. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
The old radio guy, 30 minutes.
Yeah, precisely on the clock. Got to hit the post. Hannity's been talking about hitting the post here. We're
okay. We're okay. I want to remind people about the FairTax logo store. You can pick up these little things. We have gotten several good volunteers because my wife wears this. She puts it on the strap, and the pull-out banner. Use that at your congressman's town hall. That'll get their attention. But we've actually got some wonderful volunteers because they noticed this on my wife's, the strap of her purse. And one thing led to another. And we work on the fair tax, okay? You can get pens and travel mugs. You can get whatever the heck this thing is, all right? and it can serve as a flashlight, and it's got FAIRtax on there. You can give it away. There's all kinds of promotional story. We call it the promotional closet now. It is the FAIRtaxLogoStore.org. FAIRtaxLogoStore.org.
Okay, are you done?
Yeah.
Again, thanks for listening to FAIRtax Power Radio. Share the videos on Facebook. Invite your family and friends to watch. Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
We are the FAIRtax Guys,
Guys,
reminding you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you will demand it.
Oh, these income tax forms are way too complicated. There's got to be a better way. Who are you?
we're the FAIRtax Guys.
We've got a big solution for you.
What's that?
It's the FAIRtax. Completely eliminates the federal income tax system as we know it. No more withholding, no more payroll taxes, no more tax returns ever, no more IRS. All gone. And I guarantee you, once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
Yeah.